in the peaceful town of Georgia. Anitra Gunn, a vibrant senior college student, was nearing her graduation and a promising future. By her side was DeMarcus Little, a young Army sergeant who seemed like a steadfast pillar of support. But behind the sweet moments lay a relationship like a locked cage, where jealousy, control, and threats crept in day by day, gradually suffocating every bit of breathing room. Then, just hours before Valentine's Day, Anitra's phone unexpectedly sent strange messages to her friends, hinting that she was about to meet a stranger, words that even her friends found unlike her usual way of texting. The next morning, Anitra vanished, leaving behind a mud-stained car, a phone discarded in a drain, and DeMarcus's name at the center of a storm of investigation. What had caused those simmering conflicts to erupt into tragedy, and in those final hours? What were the true thoughts in both of their minds? In the small city of Fort Valley, quiet streets and a sprawling university campus create a serene backdrop of rural Southern America. This is where Anitra Gunn's story begins. Anitra Gunn, 23 years old, was a senior at Fort Valley State University in Georgia, majoring in agriculture. With glossy black hair and a radiant smile, she exuded positive energy that warmed those around her. But behind those sunny smiles was a life far from easy. From a young age, she had faced the profound loss of her mother, a devastating blow that forever changed her family. Christopher Gunn, her devoted father, single-handedly took on the responsibility of raising the family, which also fell into financial hardship. Despite facing numerous financial struggles, Anitra remained determined to pursue her dream of higher education. She studied full-time while working part-time as a server at the 1836 restaurant in Louis to cover living expenses. Despite the challenges, Anitra found joy in her family, who were her constant source of motivation on her journey to achieve her dreams. But in Anitra's life, there was another figure, DeMarcus Little, her 22-year-old volatile boyfriend. DeMarcus was a U.S. Army sergeant stationed at Fort Eisenhower, formerly Fort Gordon in Augusta. He had joined the military in 2016 and was currently serving as a unit supply specialist, a role requiring precision and high responsibility. Like Anitra, DeMarcus also carried a painful past. He lost his mother at a young age and was raised by his father and stepmother in a family with 2 sisters. On the surface, DeMarcus appeared to be a responsible young man, a soldier serving his country, with a stable job and decent income. These qualities drew Anitra to him, and she quickly entered a relationship with DeMarcus. On paper, DeMarcus seemed like a good match for Anitra. Both had endured the pain of losing their mothers at a young age, and both were building their own careers. They could understand the hardships the other had faced, but beneath that perfect exterior, the relationship between Anitra and DeMarcus hid deep-seated issues that not everyone could see. What began as a romantic relationship gradually turned into a web of control, manipulation, and threats from which Anitra seemed unable to escape. Messages exchanged between the two during this time painted a troubling picture of DeMarcus's true nature. He was not the responsible young soldier everyone thought. Instead, he displayed extreme controlling behavior, constantly monitoring Anitra's every move, questioning who she met and where she went. In private conversations with close friends, Anitra described DeMarcus with a single, weighty word: vicious. This was not the casual complaint of a young woman about her boyfriend. It was a silent cry for help from someone trapped in a dangerous relationship. She frequently tried to cut off contact with DeMarcus, but each time, he found ways to pull her back with cunning tactics. November 31st, 2019 marked a significant turning point in their relationship. After enduring prolonged control and manipulation, Anitra made a firm proposal they should completely stop communicating. This was the first time she clearly expressed her determination to end the toxic relationship. However, for DeMarcus, this was not an end but a new challenge to overcome. DeMarcus's response to this proposal revealed his manipulative nature. Instead of respecting Anitra's decision, he began using sophisticated psychological tactics to force her to maintain contact. One of his most dangerous ploys was threatening suicide. This was an extremely serious form of psychological abuse, turning the victim into someone responsible for the manipulator's life. DeMarcus often sent messages threatening to take his own life, blaming Anitra for his mental state, then abruptly going silent for hours. These silences were not random, they were carefully calculated to create anxiety and guilt in Anitra. She would fear that DeMarcus had actually harmed himself, ultimately prompting her to reach out to check on him. That was when he achieved his goal, pulling her back into the toxic cycle. In November, on Anitra's birthday, a day that should have been filled with joy and happiness, DeMarcus displayed an even more alarming level of control and threats. He discovered that another man was showing interest in Anitra, and his reaction was not sadness or hurt, but direct threats. In a message to Anitra, DeMarcus wrote that he was willing to pay $200 to harm the other man. This was no longer an empty threat, but a specific plan with a specific price. The fact that he could come up with such a figure showed he had seriously considered hiring someone to hurt his perceived romantic rival. Throughout this time, one name repeatedly surfaced in the arguments between Anitra and DeMarcus: David Scoot Howard. Scoot was a barber living near Anitra's home and had seemingly become an obsession for DeMarcus. He constantly accused Anitra of having a relationship with Scoot, monitoring their every interaction and turning innocent conversations into evidence of betrayal. DeMarcus's suspicions and accusations did not stop at Scoot. He continually created scenarios in his mind about Anitra communicating with others, turning her ordinary friendships into threats to their relationship. This forced Anitra to constantly explain and justify her actions, gradually isolating her from friends and family. The situation escalated and reached a climax in the early hours of February 5, 2020. At around 3 a.m., DeMarcus committed an act that the law calls vandalism, a crime that could lead to arrest and prosecution. For him, however, it was merely a way to express his anger and assert ownership over Anitra. The trigger for this vandalism was DeMarcus discovering that Scoot had stayed overnight at Anitra's house. Unable to accept this, he went to her home in the dead of night and carried out an attack on her property. He smashed 2 windows of Anitra's house, leaving cracks and shattered glass strewn about. Not stopping there, he also slashed her car tires, an act that not only caused financial damage but could have endangered her life if she drove unaware of the damaged tires. The next morning, upon discovering the damage, Anitra called the police to report the incident. Notably, however, she told the police she did not know who the perpetrator was. This could be interpreted in several ways. Either she was genuinely uncertain, she was trying to protect DeMarcus from legal consequences, or she feared that accusing him would lead to even graver repercussions. What's concerning is that this was not the first time Anitra's tires had been slashed in the night. Police records noted it was the second time she faced this issue, suggesting someone was deliberately targeting her. This painted a picture of escalating violence, from threatening messages to actual property damage. These events, when viewed in hindsight after the final tragedy, formed a clear chain of warning signs about the approaching danger. The relationship between Anitra and DeMarcus had crossed the line from a typical toxic relationship into the territory of real violence. The controlling behaviors, suicide threats, threats against others, and property vandalism were all serious red flags often highlighted by domestic violence experts. Unfortunately, at the time, these signs were not fully recognized or addressed appropriately. Anitra still held on to hope that the situation would improve, that DeMarcus would change, and that she could safely escape the relationship. However, like many victims of domestic violence, she did not realize the danger was escalating at an alarming rate. The night of February 13, 2020 began like any other weekend night for Anitra Gunn. She decided to attend a party with friends, one of the social activities she tried to maintain, despite the strains in her relationship with DeMarcus Little. After the party ended, Anitra chose to leave with DeMarcus Little. Accompanying them were Javon Abram, a close friend of DeMarcus, and Tracy King, a female friend. The presence of these friends may have initially given Anitra a sense of safety. The group of 4 first went to DeMarcus's house. Later, Anitra and DeMarcus left the group to go to her house on West Church Street to retrieve her car, a white Chevy Cruze she often used for school and work. Their next stop was a Waffle House, where Anitra and DeMarcus ate together after the meal. The two went to DeMarcus's aunt's house on Chestnut Hill Road to spend the night. That was the last time Anitra Gunn was seen alive. The morning of February 14, 2020, Valentine's Day began with the first alarming signs that caused concern for Anitra Gunn's loved ones. Sierra Stewart, Anitra's best friend, received a message from Anitra's phone that felt off. The message's content was strange, hinting that Anitra was about to meet a stranger, a detail completely unlike her usual way of communicating. Sierra, with the intuition of a close friend, immediately sensed something was wrong. She knew Anitra's communication style, her tone, and the words she typically used. This message lacked Anitra's characteristic style, leading Sierra to suspect someone else might have used her friend's phone. At the same time, David Scoot, Howard the barber, DeMarcus had previously suspected and threatened, also received an unusual message from Anitra's phone. The message asked him to send his address, a puzzling and seemingly baseless request. Scoot, aware of the issues Anitra had faced with DeMarcus, also grew concerned about the odd nature of the message. Sierra's anxiety grew when she couldn't reach Anitra through normal means. She tried calling and texting, but received no response. Realizing the situation might be serious, Sierra contacted Christopher Gunn, Anitra's father in Atlanta. Christopher Gunn, upon receiving Sierra's call, immediately felt deep concern. He knew his daughter's character. Anitra always stayed in regular contact and would never worry her family without good reason. Her lack of response and the unusual phone activity made him realize something serious might have happened. Without hesitation, Christopher asked the local police to check Anitra's house on West Church Street. He hoped it might be a minor issue or simply a dead phone battery. However, when the police arrived, they found no sign of Anitra at home. Even more troubling, her distinctive white Chevy Cruze was nowhere to be found. Recognizing the situation's potential severity, Christopher Gunn drove from Atlanta to Fort Valley. This journey was not just that of a worried father, but the first step in a search that would last days. Upon arriving in Fort Valley, he went straight to the police station and officially filed a missing person report for his daughter. Acknowledging the case's seriousness, law enforcement quickly formed a multi-agency task force, including the Fort Valley Police Department, the Peach County Sheriff's Office, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation (GBI). This collaboration showed they understood this was no ordinary missing person case. The investigation began with questioning DeMarcus Little, the last person known to have seen Anitra. His statement that she left his aunt's house at 11:30 a.m. on February 14th for a job interview immediately revealed serious inconsistencies. When police checked, they found the interview was scheduled for 9:30 a.m., meaning if DeMarcus's account were true, Anitra would have been 2 hours late. This contradiction quickly turned DeMarcus from a witness into a potential suspect. Investigators began digging into his relationship with Anitra, uncovering a long history of conflicts, threats, and controlling behavior. Meanwhile, the search for Anitra's car yielded results. The white Chevy Cruze was found just a few blocks from her home, but its condition suggested something unusual had occurred. The front bumper was completely missing, and mud was caked on the tires, indicating the car had been driven through rough or rural terrain. Inside the car, police found Anitra's wallet and keys, but her phone was missing. The fact that her wallet and keys were left behind while her phone was taken painted a suspicious picture. Had someone deliberately taken the phone to prevent tracking or communication? Forensic analysis revealed DeMarcus's fingerprints and DNA in Anitra's car and on his own vehicle. However, this was not entirely surprising, as they were in a relationship and often used each other's cars. Another critical detail emerged from DeMarcus's statement. He claimed Anitra shared her phone's location with him, and the last tracking showed it at South Camellia Road. However, when police searched, they found Anitra's phone in a drain on Carver Road, a location just 5 minutes away by car but entirely different from what DeMarcus reported. The discovery of the phone in the drain was not coincidental. It was clearly a deliberate act to dispose of evidence or prevent location tracking. The discrepancy between the location DeMarcus provided and where the phone was actually found further heightened suspicions about his account. The search for Anitra Gunn continued through Georgia's harsh winter weather, with the task force working tirelessly to find clues about her fate. The tense days of searching reached a tragic climax when a Peach County deputy sheriff discovered a small road with signs of vehicle traffic leading deep into a remote forest. Beneath a thin layer of branches, Anitra's body was found, along with part of the front bumper of her Chevy Cruze, the final piece matching the missing bumper on her car. The autopsy revealed a heartbreaking truth: Anitra had been strangled to death, with evidence of at least one blow to the head, and her body had been dragged to this location to conceal the crime. DeMarcus Little's trial officially began in December 2022, nearly 3 years after Anitra's death. The courtroom became a legal battleground between two sides, with starkly opposing arguments about what truly happened on that fateful night. DeMarcus Little's defense team built their strategy on creating reasonable doubt about their client's role in Anitra Gunn's death. They understood they didn't need to prove DeMarcus's innocence, only to make the jury question the certainty of the charges. Their first and most significant argument was that there was no direct evidence proving DeMarcus killed Anitra. They emphasized that no witnesses saw Little commit the murder, no video footage existed, and no physical evidence directly linked him to the victim's death. Furthermore, they argued that DeMarcus's lack of a confession or self-incriminating behavior suggested he was not the true perpetrator. The defense's strategy centered on discrediting the key witness, Javon Abram, DeMarcus's close friend. The defense accused Abram of trying to save himself from potential charges related to the case by blaming DeMarcus. They argued that Abram's testimony was unreliable because he had a personal motive to distort the truth to avoid legal consequences. Another key point the defense emphasized was that when DeMarcus left Anitra, she was still alive. They argued that the only evidence suggesting Anitra was dead relied on Abram's testimony, a man they claimed had changed his story multiple times to suit his own interests. While not offering a specific alternative theory for the cause of death, the defense skillfully planted doubts about the possibility of someone else committing the act after DeMarcus left. They suggested that the time gap between when DeMarcus left and when Anitra was found dead was long enough for another perpetrator to intervene. The prosecution, led by experienced prosecutors, presented a comprehensive and compelling case against DeMarcus Little. They didn't rely on a single piece of evidence, but wove together multiple types of evidence to create an irrefutable logical chain. Digital evidence became the backbone of the prosecution's case. Location data from both Anitra's and DeMarcus's phones painted a clear picture of what happened that fateful night. The data showed that both had traveled together to a remote area precisely where Anitra's body was later found. More importantly, the data revealed they stayed in that area for a significant period, long enough for a serious confrontation to occur. A critical point in the digital evidence was that after this period, only DeMarcus's phone moved away from the area, while Anitra's phone was completely disabled. This created a clear picture DeMarcus left the scene alone, leaving Anitra behind. Another key piece of evidence was the final message sent from Anitra's phone. The message, "I'm talking to a friend. I love you. Good night," was sent at 11:47 p.m. on February 13th. The prosecution argued this message was suspicious for several reasons. First, the wording was inconsistent with Anitra's usual communication style. Second, the timing of the message coincided with when DeMarcus's phone resumed normal activity after an unusual period of silence. Javon Abram's testimony became the most pivotal evidence in the case. Initially, Abram only admitted to helping DeMarcus dispose of part of a car bumper, seemingly trying to downplay his involvement. However, under investigative pressure, and possibly driven by guilt, Abram eventually decided to tell the truth. In his critical testimony, Abram revealed that DeMarcus had confessed to him about strangling Anitra to death. This was not hearsay or speculation, but a direct confession from DeMarcus to his closest friend. The change in Abram's testimony was not a sign of unreliability, but a reflection of an internal struggle between loyalty to a friend and doing what was right. Anitra's friends and family provided crucial testimony about the true nature of her relationship with DeMarcus. They described a toxic relationship filled with control and manipulation, where DeMarcus constantly threatened and harassed Anitra. These testimonies not only established a motive for the crime, but also showed the escalation of violence from psychological to physical. Forensic evidence, despite the partial decomposition of the body when discovered, provided vital clues. The discovery of the broken car bumper from Anitra's Chevy Cruze near her body, perfectly matching the missing piece on her car, created an undeniable physical link between the victim and the crime scene. After 3 hours of intense deliberation, the jury reached its final verdict. They concluded that DeMarcus Little was not guilty of malice murder, but was guilty of felony murder and aggravated assault. This distinction in the verdict reflected the jury's careful consideration. They may have recognized that, while DeMarcus killed Anitra, the act might have occurred in a fit of rage rather than with premeditated malice. However, this did not lessen the severity of the crime or the legal consequences he faced. During sentencing, the prosecutor used a powerful metaphor to describe the relationship between Anitra and DeMarcus the Frog in a pot of slowly boiling water. This metaphor illustrated how manipulation and control had escalated subtly, leaving Anitra unaware of the danger until it was too late to escape. Ultimately, the court sentenced DeMarcus Little to the maximum penalty life imprisonment without parole in March 2022. This sentence was not only punishment for the crime committed, but also a strong warning about the consequences of domestic violence and the importance of recognizing warning signs before tragedy strikes. After the verdict was announced, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Anitra Gunn's family members, who had followed every trial session hoping for justice for their daughter, niece, and beloved friend, finally had the chance to speak. Christopher Gunn, the father who lost his only daughter, delivered an emotional speech in court. He spoke not only of the irreparable pain of loss, but also requested the court impose the maximum sentence on the person who took Anitra's life. Other family members also shared the profound impact Anitra's death had on their lives, a wound that could never heal. In response to the heartfelt pleas from the victim's family, the judge sentenced DeMarcus Little to the highest possible penalty, life imprisonment without parole. This sentence meant Little would spend the rest of his life in prison, with no chance of conditional release. The case also had serious consequences for Javon Abram, Little's friend who played a key role in uncovering the truth. Abram was denied bail due to concerns about his safety after testifying against Little. This decision reflected real concerns about potential retaliation from Little's supporters or from Little himself if given the opportunity. The military career DeMarcus Little once took pride in also came to a complete end. He lost not only his freedom, but also his reputation, future, and any hope of a normal life. From a respected Army sergeant, he became a lifelong prisoner. The Anitra Gunn case became a powerful cautionary tale about the dangers of violent and controlling relationships. Her story illustrates the terrifying escalation of domestic violence from initial psychological threats to property vandalism and ultimately a tragic murder. The case underscores the importance of recognizing early warning signs and intervening in time before it's too late.